Hello and good morning, I'm Lachlan. Grab yourself a coffee. Let's get to some designing. So today we're designing this. So cool little Cologne bottle, going for this nice earthy tone, frosted glass textured little bottle. It's going to be a nice simple one today. We're going to do a bit of modeling, a little bit of lighting. We're going to jump into Adobe Illustrator and we're going to run over how I made this pretty simple, nice little AV logo. Throw it back in a blender, call it a day, and you've got yourself a little Cologne bottle. So let's jump in. So first things first, in our fresh blender scene, we're just going to come over into our front view. I'm going to add our reference image. So I'm going to give you guys the final image of the bottle that we're making today so you can follow the shape of it. So Shift A, and we're going to grab a image and a background, and then just locate wherever you have the reference image. So there we are. I'm just going to scale it down a little bit. And we're going to start building with this bottle first. So to do that, still in our front view, you're going to go Shift A, add a mesh, and add ourselves a cylinder. So with our cylinder, tap into edit mode, and we want to use a little x-ray viewy thing so we can see what we're doing a little bit easier. And then just hit S to scale until those edges line up with the edge of the bottle. Perfecto. Let's get to building this bottom section first. So I'm going to go to my edge select. So I'm going to hit 2, or you can come up here, and then Alt click to grab that whole edge at the bottom there. I'm just going to bring this guy down. So GZ, bring it down. So just get into the edge there. And then we're going to hit E. And we're going to come down, just lining it up with the, like where it gets flat. It's sort of hard to see. I should have given you an image without this bottom bit. I just realized. But it's somewhere in this vicinity. Doesn't matter. It'll be all right. And then just, once you got that, just hit S to scale. And just bring that guy in. About there. Now, for this bit, so we need to get this to come out a little bit more, just going to add some loop cuts in. So to do that, I'm going to hit Control R, and then scroll up on the mouse wheel, chuck 3 of them in, maybe 4 for good measure, click, and then left click, and then right click, and that will lock them sort of in the center there. So then what we can do is, once again, holding Alt and clicking, we're going to select these loops and scale them out till they follow this curve here. So with top one selected, S, and then Alt click that guy, S for scale, Alt click that guy, S for scale, and Alt click one more time. Bada bing, bada boom, you've got yourselves a bottle. Not quite, we're going to do this little step up section next here. So same principle as the bottom bit. So I want to Alt click to grab this top guy, GZ, bring it down. I'm just going to go to this edge here. And now with this, it looks quite like bubbly. We didn't actually, like, it looks like we need to go extrude and then like scale, then extrude. Like you can do that as well. But with this one, we can literally just go, I'm going to inset the faces and just make these little step ups. So I'd recommend coming over into our vertex select mode. So still with this whole top ring selected, just because when we do this, we hit I to inset. You can see those little balls. See where those little balls that are moving? So you can see where the edge is. When we're in edge select and you do it, you can't see anything. So save yourself the hassle, go to your vertex, and then I to inset, go to there, E to extrude, I to inset, and we're literally just following it. I, pop, 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 pop. Smash it out. Then about here, now I will scale this in a little bit, just a little bit inwards, and then I to inset, just till it's in that cap a little bit. And then I'm going to hit I to inset one more time, just when we apply a subdivision surface after this, it's going to be a nice clean geometry. And while I'm thinking about that, we might as well do it with the bottom here. Well, I'll show you what I mean by this. So modifiers, subdiv, crank it up. Because we're working with glass, you do want quite a high dense mesh, just because with it being glass, if you don't, you get this sort of like flat plane looking things in the glass. It's very obvious. So just crank that up to 3. So as you can see, this is what I was sort of talking about here. So you get this like ridges. This is what you put the inset in for. So I to inset, and that just cleans that up much better. Right click and shade smooth. Come back to our front view, and it looks terrible. So we're going to add some more geometry in just to fix all these edges here. So on here, with the whole thing selected, we're just going to go Control R. Not the whole thing selected, the object selected. Control R, chuck a loop cut in. It's already pretty much done because we added the 4 in before. Might bring that up a little bit, or maybe down a little bit. Up a little bit, down a little bit. So we're seeing GG. There we go. Just get a nice smoother edge flow through there. Now we can work on this top bit here. So what I'm going to do for this one, I'll go into my edge select or your vertex, doesn't really matter. And I'm going to add a bevel to this edge here. So to do that with it selected, I'm going to hit Control B and just drag it out. So as you can see, it's going to do this. And then the more times you scroll up on your mouse wheel, smoother the edge you'll get here. So we don't need too much because you have quite a high subdivision. So I'm going to chuck in maybe 2 or 3 or 4. Something about that. Perfecto. Going to do the same to this one. So Alt click, Control B. This one's a little bit sharper. Somewhere about that. And then this top one here. So Control B. Bevel this guy out. Somewhere like that. And ta-da, we've got ourselves a bottle. Now, this shading can be a little bit harsh. I'm just noticing along this crease here. So I'm going to go to my little X-ray view. And I'm going to Alt-click and grab this, like the neck part of this mesh. And I'm just going to hit S and just bring it out a tad. And that should, there, that's much nicer. Much cleaner sort of flow up to the top. And just like that, you've got yourselves a beautiful little Cologne bottle. So, good time as always. Control S, save your file. Cologne bottle tutorial version 5000, because I've filmed this so many times. So then just save that wherever we want to. But now we've done that, we can get to modeling our little cap. So we're also going to use a cylinder again. So Shift A and grab ourselves a mesh and a cylinder. Tab into edit mode, into our little X-ray thing, scale it down. Now I'm just going to G and Z, just move it up a little bit. And what I'm going to do, just hide our background, not yet. Scale this first to correct size. So get that edges to the edge of the bottle, the cap lid, sorry. Can't speak today, can I? I need a sip of coffee, might fix it. Oh, that's better. I feel smarter already. So now we've got that scaled, I'm just going to move it down till it's just kissing the top of this bottle here. So hide that, GZ, zoom in, GZ, and just right about there. And perfecto. Now, because it's a rounded object, the camera always makes it look a little bit funny. So as you can see, these edges are actually at the edge of the mesh, but this needs to be at the top. When we take it with the actual camera, it will create that effect. So always work to where the edges are on the side bits here whenever you're doing something that's similar like a can, like we did in the last tutorial, or this bottle here. So you're done. That's the whole thing, pretty much. Call it a day. So we do have just this little detail in here, this little inset part. You don't need to do it if you don't want to, but we are. So nice and simple for this one. So with our cap selected, I'm going to add in a loop cut, and I'm going to drag it down just to where that top edge is. It's a little bit hard to see, but just guess. Somewhere there. So I'm going off this top edge first. I'm going to do these top bits, and then I'll do the center bits after. So on this bottom bit now, Control R to about there. And then for this middle bit, to make it even, I'm going to add in a loop cut, left click, right click. So it's in the center of the cuts we just made. And then I'm going to hit Control B, and we just can scroll down just so it's just the one, and to somewhere about there. Now, with this bit still selected, we're going to hit S and Shift Z. Now, what Shift Z does is it locks it on it essentially doesn't apply to the Z axis, right? So when we do this, it's just going in and out on the X and Y, but not in the Z. So what we can do, bring this guy in a little bit. Perfecto. Let's see a little bit better what's going on here. Probably shouldn't have shaded it smooth. There you go. Now you can see how it's coming in like this. So we're going to use another subdivision for this guy. So subdivision surface, just 2 for this one. And it looks horrendous, I know. So to fix that, just Alt-click this top row and Alt-Shift-click. We're going to grab this bottom row and we're going to add a bevel to this guy. So Control B, bevel it out a little bit, and just add a couple edges in. Just as something like so. Nice and little. And then you probably don't have to. Sometimes your shading might be bad. You might need to add an inset face on this top here, but looking pretty good to me. So I want to clean up this bit. As you can see with the subdivision, it's made it all bubbly, same as it did with these. So just add some more geometry in. So grab these two guys, Control B, don't need that many, they're just 2. Something about, probably only need that many. About that, and then these two guys as well, just little ones. Why has it done that? So what I've done here, so the reason why just then, when I've gone to bevel these, it's then beveled it, these, like the centered, these edges as well, is because we weren't using edge select, so we were beveling the vertex bit. So make sure you're in your edge select, not be a goose like me. Alt click, Alt Shift click. Now when we bevel it, there we go. Much nicer. And then about there. Perfect. Look at that. Nice. Just a little bit of extra detail. Looks really clean. Make sure you right click and shade smooth. Good time now while we're here, because these are both cylinders. We'll just name them. So cap and bottle. And that, my friends, that's the bottle all modeled. So don't forget to save your file, and we're looking pretty good here. So what we're going to do next is we're going to model the rest of the scene out. So it's just a flat background and this little sort of plinth stand, if you will, on it here. So for the bottom bit, nice and simple, another cylinder. Who'd have thought? Shift A and then G, Z, and would you look at that? That pretty much fits spot on the money, just like that. And then what I'm going to do is just hide our reference again and just have this just so it's kissing this bottom bit. So GZ, just there. And what I'm going to do is Alt click and Alt Shift click these guys and edge select and add just a little bevel to them. Perfect. And same as before, subdivision, shade smooth. You probably only really need the one for this one, just because it's not really, you're focusing on this bottle here, not so much this guy. So we're looking good. Now the last thing is just to add the background from this. So literally it's just a flat plane we're going to be using. So Shift A, grab a plane, scale it up a little bit, and then we see to rotate it over on the x-axis. So RX 90, GY, and just pull it back a little bit. Somewhere about yay. Ta-da! You pretty much got our entire finished scene. So now that we've done this, save a file, and we're going to get to our lighting. So for this, I like to just simply split this window open here. This is going to be my little 3D move around area, and this will be our nice little sort of rendered zone. So what I'm going to do, zoom in a little bit, come up to a bit of a nice angle, somewhere we can just see the whole thing clearly. Go on to our shading, edit a bit. Now it's going to be very dark, there's no lighting in it. And for this one, we are going to be using cycles. Now, because we're working with glass, cycles is the way to go. You can get glass with Eevee, there's lots of tricks to do it. But for this, we're going to be using cycles. While we're in here as well, what I'm going to do, make sure I have that optics X, is in our light passes, this does eat up your render time, but I think that I can notice quite a significant result when you do up your light bounces. Obviously with glass, you have all the light going in and out. The more light bounces you give Blender, the better the result will turn out. So I'm just going to crank all of this, click and drag to 18. And that's going to, I reckon that's enough. Sure, if you want to go higher, go higher. It's not really necessary. Same as you could turn these guys probably down to 12. But we're going crazy. We're going 18 for all of them. And then also in our filmic, we're in our color management section. So open this guy up, filmic and high contrast. Perfecto. So we are going to be using a HDRI for this guy here. So, and then we're going to also use a couple little extra lights as well, just to spice it up a little bit. So I'm going to come here into our world properties and I'm going to color and environment texture. Open. And then I have used this one here, the Browns. No, I didn't. Photo Studio Broadway, I think it's called. Photo Studio Broadway. It's just from Polyhaven. I'll link it down below so you guys can use the same one if you like as well. Now, I want to pop this down a little bit. Now, the reason I've done this is I'm just using this HDRI for just sort of the fill light to fill in all the shadows. And we're going to add a spotlight as the sort of main source of light. So that's looking nice and good here. So in here, Shift A, going to grab a light and grab a area light. S to scale it up a little bit. In our thing, we're going to, in our little light properties, turn it into a disk. And then I'm going to go GZ, bring it up a little bit, go to my top view, and I'm just going to bring it slightly, like, you know, off to the right. So somewhere about here. And then what you can do is hit double R, so hit R twice, and that will give you your trackball rotation, so it sort of pivots off the light source, and just pointer at your bottle. Might make it a bit bigger as well. So we want it just nice and soft light. We don't want too harsh of a point. So the smaller this is, the more like hard edge shadows you're going to get, and the bigger it is, the softer it's going to be. So there it looks. That should work. And then pop this guy up, slap it to 1000, and look how much better that is. So as you can see, 1000 should work for this. Now, obviously, if you have made this bigger or smaller, the lighting does affect the scale. So if you have a huge object, a huge Cologne bottle, just crank this guy up. There's no pain in going crazy, putting up to 10 bazillion. Doesn't matter. But for this scene, I think 1000 is going to be great. So 1000. And then we're going to add a couple little more elements. We're going to add one more light here. I'm going to go to our top view for this one. Shift A, and we're going to grab a point light. Now, you won't be able to see why we need this one right away, but it will all come clear later. I just want you guys to just grab this guy, so GY, and just pull it behind our Cologne bottle. Come to your front view, and on the radius of this guy, bring it up until you can just sort of see the edge of here, and just center it to this bottle. So somewhere centered, excluding this bottom bit. So fill this area in here. You'll see why later. Just leave that as it is. Now, one last thing we're going to do for lighting is if we look in our rendered view, it's quite dark on this side with your product photography stuff. You do want it semi-even. You want to be able to see the whole product clearly. So what we're going to do is not add another light. We're actually going to add a little bounce plane. So what I mean by that, we're going to go Shift A, Mesh, and grab in a plane. Scale it up just a little bit, somewhere out there. And I want to flip it over this way. So RY 90. And now you'll sort of see, focus on these shadows that were there before. So I want to move it away. And then as you can see, as we bring this guy in, see that's how now it's pretty much evenly lit on both sides, even though we haven't added a light. So we're going to bring it back somewhere about there. Looks good for me. So just looking at this section here. So without, where is it? Without the plane, bit darker. With the plane, it just fills in that edge there. Maybe even bring it a little bit closer. Perfecto. Save your file. While I'm here, I'm just going to label these so I don't get confused. Bounce plane. This is going to be our background. Perfect. And this is going to be our stand, I guess. And then what I'm going to do, I'm going to, in this little collection section, write a new collection. And I learned this from old mate Derek Elliott, absolute legend. If you don't follow him, that's where I've learned everything I know from. So Derek Elliott, so LCA for lights, camera, action. And what we can do is I also add my background stuff into this as well. So my stand can go in there, the point light, the area light, the background, the bounce plane. So then you have all of that stuff in here. So then you can just work with the bottle when you want to. And while we're here, you know, LCA, lights, camera, action, let's get to adding this camera. So Shift A, grab yourself a camera. I'm going to come to front view and just hit Control Alt 0. And that should, I don't know why it does it when you're in orthographic view. It doesn't put it to where your viewport is. But like it should, wherever you're looking, when you hit Control Alt 0, should make the camera point there. I have no idea why when you're in front view. Whatever, it doesn't matter. So just fix this up. So we want it straight on. So 0 out on that. I'm going to make this dimensions for just like an Instagram sort of post size. So like sort of 4x5. So for that, 1350 and 1080. Perfecto. Bring this guy out and we're going to, in our camera settings, put the focal length to 100. Now, the bigger the focal length, the sort of more, I don't want to say like flat the image is, but with round stuff, it makes the round objects more square. That sounds not good, but it is. Because if not, you get that sort of warped pull. The bottle will go like, and you want it to be nice and visible, especially because you are putting a logo on it. So 100 mils for that guy. Hit 0 on your numpad. That gets into camera view. It's on here. Bring it back. I'm going to drop it down a little bit, somewhere at 86 degrees down. Front on is okay, but a little bit down I think looks a bit nicer. And to be honest, that's pretty much schmack on the money. Might bring it down a little bit. There we go. That's going to be what we are working with. So, Control S, save that guy, and now we can start getting into the logo making for this one. So we're going to jump over into Adobe Illustrator to show you how I made this really quick, nice little logo. Now, if you have your own logo or imagery you want to use, or you don't want to use any logos at all, you can just skip through this part. I'll put a timestamp in for when we start working on these materials. But for you who want to follow along with the tutorial on the logos, I'll see you guys in Illustrator. So now with the logo design for this one, it was based off a logo I saw in this amazing book called Trademarks and Symbols. Now it's by this designer, I'm going to butcher the name so don't hate me, called Yasuburo Kawayama. I probably said that so wrong, but it's this amazing book. Here's a few of them of just logos upon logos upon logos. Now it's quite an expensive book. If you do want to buy a copy, one day I'll buy one, but you can be naughty and it is online. You can find PDFs of it online. Probably very illegal, but it's great for us designers. So I'll put some screenshots up of it. I don't think I'll include any pictures of it in a file for you guys to use, because I'm not sure if I'm legally allowed to do that. But if you Google it, it should come up. So with that in mind, I just found going through it, he literally has in this one, there's just pages upon like the letters. So the pages for letter A, B, C, D, so on. And so I'll go into this. So in our nice little Illustrator, like fresh file here, I've just got a 30 by 30 centimeter canvas. Now, as I said in our last tutorial, you do want a nice high resolution file, because personally I've noticed whenever you import images back into Blender, they do lose a bit of quality. So starting nice and big will give us a nice result later on. So here's what I have here for reference. So it was this one here, number 66. I just love this little AV thing, and it happened to be because I was going through Adobe fonts and I came across a font name called Aviano, like Aviano, and that's what sort of sparked this whole Cologne bottle thing. Is I literally read that name like Aviano, and it just screamed Cologne to me. So it just all sort of fell into place. So we're going to be basing our design off something similar to this, but as you can see here, like just some of these are like killer, and this one as well, like that's actually what's probably more going to look like than this one. I literally just noticed that. How's that? I'm just staring at this one. But there's just some of those shapes and lines, they're just really, really nice just on this one page right here, like the negative space on this. Delicious. So with this in mind, we're going to be focusing on this guy, and we can jump straight into it. So now, even though we are doing an image texture, I haven't used the UV editor for it because A, I'm lazy, and B, I'll show you why a little bit later. But what I've done is I have just got my reference image in here just because I might use it for proportions and scales a little bit later, even though we can edit it on, but it's just nice to have there to look at. So to get us underway for this little logo design for Aviano, in Illustrator, grab your text, make a little box, and just capital A, capital V, and just crank this guy up just so we can see it a little bit easier. There we go. So now, whenever you're doing logo stuff, as old mate Aaron Draplin said, vectors are free. So always duplicate your previous copy, just so you can always go back and make changes and you don't actually delete something that you might have wanted to use later. So with our AV here, it's going to come over here. And the font I'm using for this one, the type is called Ivy Mode. I'll link it down below. Now, I need to make our text box a little bit bigger. Can't see this guy. There we go. Little AV, and I'm going to be using the regular size for this one. So, make a copy. Now, with this, we're going to extend this text box a little bit, because what we're going to do, select it, and come to our character, our type properties, and here, we're going to extend it out on the horizontal scale, up to 120%. So, that's what we're going to be working with here. Duplicate a copy. So as you can sort of see with this, we're pretty much nearly already there. You can just go like, pop, 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 pop. You know what I mean? And that's sort of the shape that we're going to be working with. As you can see, that is pretty much that already. Now, as much as you could just do this and call it a day, I want to make sure that this point here is in the center of these two guys. So for that one, what I'm going to do, just get rid of the kerning on this guy. grab this. I'm going to convert this to outline, just to a shape. So Control Shift O, Control Shift 0, O, sorry. So that means we just now have it as just two shape layers, and we can just right click and ungroup them so they're nice and separate. So grab them, Alt click. So yeah, to make the copies, you can obviously Control C, Control V. That takes way too long. All you need to do is with them selected is you hold Alt and you can drag. I'm holding Shift as well just to keep them in line. So what I want to do here is I don't like how these points are, it's like a squared off bottom. So I just want to merge them in the center. So with your direct selection tool, grab them and then Control Alt J and then both and hit OK. And bang, there you can see the merge there. And I'm going to do the same with the top of this A here. So just with our little tool here, so either hit, A on your keyboard or just come here and press it. Click and drag, Control Alt J, and both. Boom. So now we know that we've both got those points all done. Make a copy. And now we can start sort of building this shape a little bit. So to figure out the center of this point here, maybe your Illustrator will get lucky and you might get it aligned here, but I'll show you a little trick for it. First of all, we want to align these to the bottom. So select both and in your align properties, just align them at the bottom. And then what I'm going to do here is just going to grab a rectangle or your marquee tool. So you can just hit M on your keyboard, come to this anchor point here, click and drag and go to this anchor point there. You can just scale that out so you can see what you're working with. So I know that this here is this whole length. So all we need to do is get half of it. So another really simple way, this isn't probably the best way, but it's how I'm doing it, so deal with it, is just come here in line with this little section here, click and drag, and we're gonna go to the halfway point, boop, and it will auto lock. So because it's locking, you know it is the correct measurements. You can then get rid of the big box, and we now know that this edge here is the center point of the A. So we can just grab our V, hold Shift and drag, and just line him up, and we'll click somewhere about there. There we go. And now we know that's all centered up. Look at this, we're nearly done. Alt drag, create another copy, get rid of that box. Now I want to get rid of these little sort of extra taily bits here. So to do that, I'm going to select it all and I'm going to use the Shape Builder tool. So how this works is it's a nice little tool in which you can do to merge and cut lots of little bits of shapes out. It works the same as a Pathfinder tool, essentially. But just a little bit more freedom. This, who knows what any of these little squares mean. So this is the method we're going to do. So with both of these guys selected, we're going to hit Shift M, and that's the Shape Builder tool. It'll pop up. You can find it. It's this little sort of double circle looking thing here. And now how it works is normally with the little plus icon, I don't know if you can see on my cursor, there's a little plus that will join them together. So click and drag. So it's became one shape. But if you hold Alt and you drag through something, it will delete it. So nice and handy for when, you're making any sort of shapes, get rid of this. You can then cut through that, whatever. Super, super easy. You can just stack shapes and then cut the bits away you don't need. So for that one, get rid of that guy. And we're gonna get rid of this guy, but we can't because these aren't joined. So we'll have to do that in a little bit. Let's get them done. Join these guys up. So as you can see, because this is one whole shape, we can't just sort of cut through that area. So we just need to merge them again. Same method in how we made the pointy bottoms on the A and the V. So direct selection tool, grab them, Control Alt J, and both. And then we're gonna need to do it here as well. So just click and drag, box select those guys, Control Alt J, and both. Boom, now they're separate little points. While I'm here, may as well be good. Alt drag, create another copy. Shift M, back into our Shape Builder tool. Now when we hold Alt, there we go. We can cut those bits away and keep it all here. So to be honest, I actually don't mind this look with the little extra V. It does actually work sort of quite well. You could even make a little stroke around here. But for this logo, I'm just gonna get rid of it. But I do like that a lot actually. So I want to keep that guy as a little copy. And sometimes, if I do really like something, because you can get lost in this row, is I just put one above it, just so I know that, oh, that was a good point in which I, could explore more of. But with this guy selected, Shift M, back to Shape Builder, Alt, and drag, and bang. And then you can come in and just normal click, we're not holding Alt, and just join that. So it's all nice, one cohesive shape. And there you go, you've got your nice little A logo there. So I'm gonna Alt drag, copy this guy into here, center it, and just scale him up somewhere about that. And now we're just gonna add the eau de parfum and the size measurements. So I'm also gonna use Ivy mode for this one again. So I can actually just grab from here where we had it before, grab it from there, scale that box up a little bit, drop this size, and start typing. So it is eau de parfum, however you spell that. Is that spelled correctly? There we go, eau de parfum. And then I'm gonna come to here and I just wanna center that, just center align the text box. And I'm gonna make a little duplicate of this guy. Duplicate, Alt drag, and this will be the 100 mils, little space, little line. Might actually do a double space, forward slash, double space. And it's 3.4 ounces for all of our little American friends over there. Perfecto, we're looking pretty good. So I want to make a copy of these guys in case I need them later. So just Alt drag, so just make as many copies as you want. You may as well. And I'm going to convert these guys to shapes as well, just a little bit easier to play around with when you are working with scale. Control Alt and O, Control Shift and O, sorry. Grab that guy. And I want this to be a little bit smaller to just go off our reference here. So Alt and Shift. So if you hold Alt and Shift, it will actually make it in the center compared to regular Shift. So Alt and Shift, somewhere about that. Looks good, maybe a little bit smaller. Grab these guys and just align them together. And I am really happy with that spacing. So I'm just gonna grab them, Control G to group them. So now both of these guys, no matter what I grab, it's all together. Make a copy. Grab that, and now it's gonna get our proportions right to the A. So for this, how I'm gonna do it for me anyway, is I'm just gonna scale this guy up a fair bit. Till it's about the size of my canvas. And then I'm just gonna roughly, that's about there, a little bit bigger. Make that smaller. You can, if you want to as well, come over to here. You know, do it sort of this method, line it up with the reference that I've given you guys, just so if you want to look exactly like mine, but play around, you might want this to be bigger. You might not even have the logo, but you know, you can just do it sort of this method, whatever you think is going to be the easiest for you to follow along with. But I know that if that's aligned with that section, and that's about there, be a little bit smaller. That's going to be about our spacing right there. Don't stress too much because I'm going to show you how we can sort of play around with our logo in Blender to get the sizing right, to make sure that it aligns where we want to. So just get it roughly how we want it. Align all those guys. I'm then going to group them really quick just to align them to the center of our canvas, horizontally and vertically. And that's our little logo sort of bit done. So later on, I'm probably gonna make a little like branding sort of box, do some box for it. So it was Aviano. Gosh, I love this one, Ivy mode, just so nice. Like put that to that. Look at that, just so clean. So play around with it, do whatever you want. Don't use this font, use another font, whatever you feel like doing, but this is what I have done. I want to put that guy there. You can add this as well here, maybe. I don't know. I sort of like having just the no type, just the logo, sort of like, you know, a Nike t-shirt, just having the tick. But that looks actually pretty nice. But nonetheless, that's it. So now with this one, we're going to export it twice. The reason being is we need one PNG with a transparent background, so we can apply it to this without, you know, having the texture. But because we need it as well for the roughness, because we have the rough glass and then the flat, like smooth, I guess, logo, that needs black and white data to distinguish the both. So that's why we need 2 copies of this guy. So for that, file, export, save it wherever you are putting all your files into a Cologne bottle. And then, so what I personally do, I just have a weird file management name system. So if it has a transparent background, I literally put PNG in front of it. So PNG, Cologne logo, whatever you want, and then use artboards, export, and this is going to be the transparent one. Okay. And now we need a file, export as, and then this will just be white. So I know it has white background, white, Cologne logo. Use artboards again. Make sure we're using artboards because whenever you're doing UV stuff, it works off a square. So it just makes your life a little bit easier, especially because we're using 2 images. So we want them to be identical. And this one, in your little background color box here, set it to white and hit OK. And we're done. And that's that little stuff done here. So, don't forget to save your file as well. Cologne logo. Bob's your uncle. So now that that's all done, we're going to jump back into Blender and get working on these materials. In Blender, jump over to our shading tab. So I just rock mine with a nice little simple 2-screen split. So put our little rendered view on here. And we're actually going to start with the background first and this plinth, just because we are working with a glass Cologne bottle. And obviously the environment plays a factor into how the glass looks. So if you were to hold a glass in front of a blue wall, the glass will appear blue. So there's not much point of us editing our bottle and making that look good if we're then going to change the background, because it will obviously affect the bottle. Hope that all makes sense. So to get that underway, I'm just going to click on our background, add new, and we can just call this background. Perfecto. So very simple one for this one. The color I use, the hex code is 5955551. So it's nice earthy tone, and we're just going to crank the roughness to a 0.8. That's literally it. That is done. So now we're going to go to our little plinthy thing. Going to click on that guy, and we're just going to duplicate that across. But what we're going to do is we're actually going to duplicate this to a new material so that the background and this one are separate, because we're actually going to add a little bit of texture to this plinth, sort of make it look like it's been painted, or a little bit of grunge to it. Just if you don't add anything, it can just look a little bit CG, if that makes any sense. So to do that, still though, very, very simple. I'm going to go Shift A and add in a noise texture. Beautiful. And we're going to Shift A again and add in a bump node. And then we're going to hit on the noise texture, Control T to pop up this guy, because we're going to need the object coordinates, just so our noise texture is evenly spread across that mesh. That into that, that into that. Boom, delicious. Look at that, looks terrible. So obviously it's nowhere near small enough, so we are literally going to slap this noise texture to a massive 500. And we'll zoom in so we can see what we're doing a bit better. All the way to 500. Now it's a bit too aggressive, but we'll be able to turn that down to the bump. I am, however, just going to increase the roughness a little bit to a 0.8. What you can do is if you hold Control and Shift and then click, you can then preview this noise texture so you can get a better understanding of what it's doing, a little bit simpler to see. 500, you can play the detail all the way to 15 as well. Just it's going to be faint. We want it to be just nice and subtle over the whole thing. Shift click onto the bump, and we're going to put that at a 0.5. So just a little bit less. You maybe even go lower, 0.4. Click back on that BSDF, Control Shift click back on that. And there we go. So that's going to be our little plinth material. We can call that the stand material if we like. Beautiful. And that bit is done. That's the environment done. Let's go on to the cap next. So we're going to click on our little cappy bit, add a new material. It's going to be called cap material. Perfect. Now for this one, it's going to be a metal cap. So we want it to be metallic. So slap that guy up the whole way. And we don't want it to be as rough, but we are going to change the roughness with a color ramp. We're going to add a little bit of texture on it. So give it a sort of smudgy, little fingerprinty-ish kind of effect, just to add a little bit of difference in the tone. Same thing, just add a little bit more, I guess, realism, quote unquote, to it. So for that roughness, we're going to add a color ramp, beautiful, Shift A and add a Musgrave, and then once again, Control T so we can have the object coordinates. So we're going to have the Musgrave into the height and then the color into the roughness. Now, before we start editing this, I am, however, just going to change the color. I want to have a black lid. So the color I'm going to use is 333333. 6 threes, and that's the black we are after. So as you can see here, whenever you're doing roughness stuff, it goes with the black and white data. That's what the color ramp is for. So black is going to be fully shiny, no roughness. I'll crank this up a little bit. We're going to set it to 22.7, I believe is what I did. If I zoom in here, you can sort of see if it's all black, it's fully shiny. And if I drag this one over, the white, it's all rough. So we don't want all rough or all shiny. So the colors I want to do is just, move these up a little bit. And the hex code is going to be 8D, 8D, 8D. That's for the darker color. And then for the lighter color, it is going to be 999999. Enter. Now, it's very subtle. You probably can't even see much of a difference on your screen. But you can sort of see you got a rougher patch here, a rougher patch here, shinier here, rougher patch here. If you do want more of a, dramatic effect, you can slide that one up a little bit if you like. But when I rendered it, this gave me the best result. You got to sort of like factor in, obviously this is only sampling up to 64 samples. So you're not going to get all the detail out of your like rendered preview. Obviously when you render it properly, you will see more stuff come through. So if you do want to make it a bit more obvious, you can feel free to crank that up, but I'm just going to leave it at that. Perfect. I will though, while we're here, detail, I'm just going to put that up a little bit just to a 10. All that does is you can sort of see the edges of this texture here. If it's on like 1, it's all very smooth, almost like cow print. And the more you crank it up, you get these sort of rougher edges. Somewhere 10, 12, whatever. Something that you're happy with, but that looks good to me. Yeah, you can see all those little rough bit. Very, very nice. So, Control S, good time to save. And now, onto the big boy. Let's get onto doing this material for the bottle. So, click on our bottle, add a new material, and this will be Cologne bottle with lots of E's, just why not? Now, for this one, we're going to use a layer weight node, using the facing value to distinguish the colors and get that nice gradient, sort of darker edges. Now, I don't know enough about it to tell you how it actually works. Blender Guru has an amazing video, pretty sure it's one of his photorealism ones, which he talks about Fresnel and how the edges of objects react to light differently, and some are more Fresnelic, that's not a word, than others, and so on. All I know is that it looks good, and that's all that I can tell you. So, but if you want to find out like properly how it all works, go check that video out. But I'll sort of show you what I mean. So I'm going to add in the layer weight node. So Shift A layer weight node, and I'm going to add in a mix RGB. Perfect. Now with this, before we start coloring, obviously this needs to be glass. So with our bottle, come over here. So your transmission, slap that all the way to 1. And then we can turn this roughness down to a 0.2. What I will do, whenever you're doing glass stuff, I'll show you what we're going to do next. We're going to add a solidify modifier. So don't do this, don't change the roughness, put it at 0.2. But if I zoom in here with no roughness, see this just craziness that's going on here? That doesn't make any sense. Why is there water in the bottle? So once we come to here, with it selected, in your modifiers, if we add a solidify, oh, look at that. So without it, with it, without it, with it. So it just fixes it all up as well. So beautiful, that is looking good. I'm gonna put my roughness back to where it belongs. Now we can get started on this guy. So with our layer weight, I'm gonna set it to a 0.41, and I'll show you what this blend value means in a little bit. And we're gonna use the facing factor. So that goes into there, and our color will go into our base color. So for our color 1, the brighter color, the hex code is F0E5DD. Bang, so this lovely, nice little tan. And then for the darker color, the hex code is 695F5C. Boom, this nice earthy, browny, slightly purpley brown to it. So as you can sort of see what effect we're having here, we've got this nice darker outside with it lighter in the middle. So how this blend works is obviously you can play around with this depending how you like the look of yours. If I go to 1, it's fully color 2, and if I go to 0, it's fully color 1. So as you increase it, you can see this darker color like creeping in towards the middle. So it's even quite nice, like quite high from a darker bottle, but when I did mine, 0.41 worked for me. Now, this is where that sneaky little point light that I made you guys add earlier comes into play. So if we just zoom out so we can see our whole bottle, somewhere like that. if you click on our point light right here, come to the light properties, and if we start to increase it, look at that. This is now why we had to add it, because when we have nothing, you barely get that layer weight node effect. You don't get that nice light middle to it. So it's subtle, right? It's not lighting the scene. It's just to give us that nice colorage on the bottle. So I'm just gonna put mine about 30. And I will, however, increase this radius, just as I said, so it's sticking out the sides. But obviously feel free to play around with it. You can make it a bit larger, smaller, but usually it's when it just started to stick out the sides to me, is when it looked good. I'll just put out 1. I might move it down a little bit, a bit more centered. There we go. Now in this, depending where you put your light, if it's closer to your bottle, the effect is going to be much greater than if it's further away. Where's further away? Somewhere. Oh, why am I trying to do it like that? Than if it's further away, right? So play around with it. Your values might be different to mine, but I am pretty happy with that guy right there. Beautiful. Cool. Save the file. Now we can start adding our beautiful little Aviano logo that we made together. So for this, we're gonna go Shift A and we're gonna add our image texture. We're gonna hit Control T on our image texture so we can get our texture coordinate node, and we're going to need our UV because we're gonna apply as a UV layer. Now I'm just gonna add these nodes and I'll explain them after. So Shift A, we need a diffuse BSDF. And we're going to need Shift A mix shader node. Beautiful, and that can go about here. Move our material output there. So how this is going to work, the reason why I made us export the 2 versions of our logo, the PNG with the transparent background, and then the black and white version is one we're going to use for the bump later on. And this one, the PNG version, is what's going to give us the logo that we can see. Now, the logo is black and we can change that logo to whatever color you want, and that's what this guy is going to be for our diffuse. So, how we arrange all of this is the alpha from the image is going to be the factor, right? So, that's deciding where these 2 are going. So, we're going to plug our glass, essentially our glass BSDF. That's going to go into number 1 on our mix shader, and the diffuse is going to be number 2. And then that goes into our material output. Now, obviously you can't see anything right now because we haven't given it its image. We need to give it its logo to work with. So, open our image and grab the PNG version. So, not the one with the white background, the one with our transparent background. So, grab that guy and you can't see anything. That's because we need to UV unwrap this guy. So, as we jump over back into our shading tab, what we need to do here is I'm going to come into my front view, and I'm going to Alt into our edit mode. And I just want to make this into our UV editor. So there's our logo there. If it hasn't come up for you, you'll just come up to here and this is where you'll pick the logo that we're working with. Now, I've filmed this tutorial about 1 million times and my computer keeps playing up and that's why it's a little bit funny right here. You can't see anything. You probably can see your logo right here, but it looks really, really ugly. It probably looks something like this, right? Or whatever. Not correct. Now, that's because on this mesh that we've made, we have a subdivision surface that is, if I turn this off, a bit easier to see. Our subdivision surface, right, from this row here, this edge to this edge, is trying to figure out all the math in between here and smooth it out. But it's only one face that it's working with, one vertical face. So what we need to do, you've probably like heard of it before. People talk about, putting stuff into quads. Essentially what that is you just want to get your faces as square as possible. A, it's clean typology, it's easy to work with. And B, when you're applying image textures, it looks much better, like it works much better if it's on a nice even grid than if it's trying to figure itself out and, warp over stuff. So we need to literally just add a little bit more geometry, even though it's already smooth, but for this purpose, a couple extra edge loops won't hurt your render time too bad. So for that, with our bottle in edit mode, Control R, and just scroll up until you make these faces nice and square. So what I mean, like these guys here, these sort of little ones, nice and square. So about there, left click and right click. Looking good. So go back into our material preview. So it still hasn't changed anything. So what we need to do is we need to re-UV unwrap this. So what we're going to do is in our edit mode, on your face select, hold Alt, click this guy, hold Shift, and go and grab all of these. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to hit U and then project from view. And this is sort of cheating a little bit, right? So if we had a graphic that was going around the entire bottle, you would want to properly UV unwrap this, but because we're putting the logo just so little on the front here, we can cheat and get away with this. So once you've done that, you can already see it's working a lot better. Open up your little side panel and just center it all. And then hit S and we can scale it up, and look at that. There is our nice little logo on our bottle. Now I'm looking at this and I can see that it's not quite centered. So I'm just going to drag it across. It's very fiddly because it's very little amount. Maybe 0.503. That's pretty good. So just get that centered. Obviously you can take your time with it and fiddle around with it properly. And then I'm looking at this and I want this eau de parfum to come down a little bit. So what we can do, and this is why, once again, back in Illustrator, I said we don't really need to worry about the UV unwrapping and our scale too much, is this is how we can edit it. So with our squares that we've nicely made, if we Alt and click and grab this section that this is on, and I'll grab this one for good measure, is you can play around with this and it won't affect the A, because we know we're not using the faces that have that image on it. So you can play around, do whatever you want, make it tiny, make it huge. So I'm going to just scale mine down a little bit. Oh, scaling it up on here makes it smaller here. Scaling it down a little bit on the bottle. Somewhere about there. And I'm just going to move it down a little bit. So just GY. And I am happy with that spot down there. And we're looking really good. So same then also applies if you wanted to change, you know, you're happy with that placement, but you then want to come and change the A. You can Alt Shift click and grab all these guys and look at that. Play around with it as much as you like. I actually might make mine a little bit smaller. Something like that. Good. Don't forget to save. We're at the home stretch here. We're nearly done. So with that one all done now, you will want to check, because we have cheated the UV unwrapping just by projecting it from view. You might have like a little bit of a random bit of the logo like up on here or on the side or whatever. So what you need to do, if you do have that, if you got a bit of random image somewhere else on the bottle, come into your front view, grab your face select, just box select all these guys that, you know, have the logo on it. And then what you can do is hit Control I, and that will select all the other faces, the stuff you don't want any of the logo on. And what you can do, scale it down super, super tiny and move it off any of the imagery. Because if you were to move it on top of it, see what I mean? You got some of the logo on it. So just put it in the corner and Bob's your uncle. Perfect. Let's jump back into the shading tab. And we're at the home stretch, guys. We just need to add a little bit of texture to this and we're pretty much done. I will, on our diffuse, I'm going to make mine a little bit grayer. Just a couple clicks down. I'm going to use CE, CE, CE. And I'm also just going to put 0.2 on the roughness just so it's not too shiny, too flat looking, like it's been stuck on. So now it's time for us to add our bump. So obviously, Shift A, add our bump node. And we're going to use a noise texture to be the main source of our bump on the bottle. So we're going to grab ourselves a noise texture. And while we're here, we might as well add all the nodes we're going to need. So Shift A, another image texture. And this is going to be the image that has the white background, right? So we can add that now. Grab the one with our white background. Beautiful. Looking good. And then Control T to bring up our node wrangler, because we're going to need our UV to make sure that's UV'd for this one. And then we're going to need to do it on this one again, on our noise texture, because we need it to be the object, right? We all following, we all know objects to make it go evenly over it, UVs if you're putting on the image. Look at this, guys, we're all over it. So for our noise texture, we can grab our factor or color, whatever, into the height, that into our normal, and as you can see, it's made the entire thing bumpy. Crank that up to 500 again, and roughness up to a 0.8. Now, it looks pretty shocking. That's because it's super, super bumpy. So if I Control Shift click on that, we don't need it that strong at all. 0.2 is more than enough for the effect we're going for. And now you can see that it's made this a lot better. What's happened to my little dude? Oh, because of this. So I always do this, Control-Shift-Click. Obviously you can view the thing. Make sure you do click on this mix shader here. I might just move that there, even though it's ugly, just so I remember that. Now what we need to do is we want the bottle to be bumpy, but we don't want our logo to be bumpy. So how we're gonna do that is we're gonna duplicate our bump node, and then we need to turn the strength down to 0, because we're gonna use it to have no bump on the image texture, right? So we can get the A to be nice and smooth. So what we then want to do is put this bump in between here. So we have the normal into the normal, and this guy into this guy. And then what we need to do is we need to get the color from our image, our black and white logo image. And we can grab the color of this one, and this will come down into the distance on our first bump node. And then it will also be the height on our secondary bump node. So if I've done this all correctly, which now I have, perfecto, is as you can see, when we view this bump, we have the bumpy bottle and the smooth logo. Nice and good. That's all looking good to me. Click on that. And as we can see, that's now all figured that one out. Why is this one going all funny now? Because of this. Bang. Click onto that, and Bob is your uncle. We are looking bloody great. So there we pretty much have it. I'm going to save my file, jump over to my layout just so I can view this nice and big. And there we go, guys. So that is going to be, that's our bottle. We're pretty much done here. What we can do is we can get ready to render this. Now, I will, before we finish this tutorial off, make a little suggestion. You know how we added more light bounces because we're working with glass? Another thing to factor in with our rendering is the fact that essentially we have added a lot of noise, right? It's actually called a noise texture. It's adding lots and lots of little bumps that's playing with all the light. And if you have your denoise on, sometimes it can now cause this bottle and this plinth to re-smooth out, and it makes the colors look very funny and very funky sometimes. Not always, but just, sometimes your denoiser can funk it up a little bit. So if you have the patience, I would up your sample count to something quite high. I did 7,000. It's probably overkill. Probably like 4,000 is enough. And turned off my denoiser. That's just so I get all the detail in the bottle and the stand without the computer trying to fix it and denoise all of it. But we'll render this one out and we will call it a day. So bang, there you have it. That's my Cologne bottle tutorial. I hope you guys really enjoyed this one. A lot simpler than our last one, doing that quite a big project on that coffee can. So if you did enjoy this, feel free to like the video. It really helps me sort of starting this whole YouTube career out. And if you have any questions, feel free to message me and I can help you out with building your own Cologne bottle. Ugh, still can't speak. Anyway, cheers guys. Have a good one and happy designing.